you've been avoiding and that I've been threatening to ask, and you've hinted that you would handle it one day, and that is the question of really what is a sonata. We've heard 3-movement sonatas. We have a 4-movement sonata today, and there are some 2-movement sonatas. What exactly is the form all about?
I'm just not prepared to handle that question, seriously.
Still.
It takes so much energy that I'm not, I don't have it available. And it's such a complicated question. What is the sonata? It's an idea. Is the Schubert sonata the same as the Schumann sonata? Is the Brahms F minor the same as the Haydn sonata? Is the Carl Philipp Emanuel the same as the Liszt sonata? Well, there's a certain intellectual idea behind the concept, and then it becomes something personal, as all form must, to accommodate the composer's ideas. For much too long a time, the Beethoven sonata had become the standard of what the sonata should be, so Schubert's sonatas were considered structurally weak. Now, this got Schubert in trouble because it didn't have any performances for the poor man. Now we have Schubert sonatas almost rivaling on programs the Beethoven sonatas. Mm-hmm. Well, the sonata itself wasn't defined until after Schubert's death, which took place 18 months before Beethoven's death. So this question is such a difficult one. It's an idea. And certainly the thing to say is that the first movement of the 3-movement or the 4-movement or this 2-movement sonata concept is your sonata allegro form. And then it has a psychological unity, either sometimes with the scherzo or in Haydn with the minuet. Sometimes Beethoven uses a set of variations. It's a long time cycle. It's one of the great ideas in abstract music. And as such, it has within it the aspiration of starting here and ending 30 minutes later. This was unheard of in music before instruments like the piano were made available, because music was tied to the word. Now, it just so happens that the sonata now, number 11, which comes in 1802, 3 years after the sonata we heard as Opus 14. He had not composed the piano sonata, obviously, for a while, 3 years. Beethoven was so proud of this work. He was just very pleased with it. He wrote about it. He sold it to publishers for more. He was indeed in love with this sonata, and it is, some call it, Tovi, this is a perfect sonata. What does that mean? I don't know.
It follows his first symphony, right, which was Opus 21.
Yes. And it is a work of remarkable beauty, and I love the way Alfred Brendel molds the opening of this. Let's hear it now. Opus 22 in B-flat major, Beethoven's 11th Piano Sonata. Let's hear that again, Matt. I absolutely love the way he soars to that opening. It's just perfect. It's just perfect. Beethoven starts the first measure, which is an upbeat, with the piano soft. By the third measure begins this, on this motive, the moving towards the B-flat, which Beethoven marks, forte, and then instantly with the bass piano, which Brendel pedals perfectly, and then begins the curve down to the D in the sixth measure, and the crescendo starting in the third measure. I know I'm getting a little technical. It's just so perfect. Well, he realizes Beethoven's markings, which are among the most precise of any composer. Let's hear Brendel. glorious, Mr. Brendel. I'm telling you, you found the tempo. Allegro con brio is the marking. And that was the first movement of Beethoven's sonata in B-flat, his 11th piano sonata, published in 1802, dedicated to another member of the aristocracy, Count von Braun, and Beethoven loved the piece, in fact wrote to his brother saying, "My dear brother, this sonata takes the cake." Let's hear Maria Grimberg. Let's hear Ms. Grinberg again. Dry. Very dry. Of course, we'll go on with it, but let's hear now Alfred Brendel. I have bought recordings, and this one I did buy because of that purple passage. The way he plays it is just, it sets it off, and he never stops. Haze he's able to get in the left hand with the pedaling after that B-flat melody note is just wonderful. Grinberg is drier. Let's hear how she plays the rest of the sonata. Maria Grinberg in the first movement of the Sonata, Opus 22 in B-flat. A good performance, nothing more. Ah, you brought in Sviatoslav Richter, didn't you? Thank you. Thank you. Let's hear him. Richter is a major artist. Very
go ahead
good.
and say it.
Very good. I liked it very much. I wish he had not smashed that B flat and ruined that opening. Of course, I'm obsessed with the opening of the sonata.
Well, there is that part there where almost a jal is required, and you're right. Brendel has it. I don't know
Yes.
what it is. There's a certain amount of anticipation. It pulls at the heart almost.
The heartstring, yeah. Brendel has that, and he continues, and it's just perfect. I think it's one of the finest performances we've yet heard. Czerny was, of course, a child hater because of his 7,000 etudes, scholastic bread and butter for generations of students. He was Beethoven's greatest student, and Czerny should not really be dishonored. He was a major force in the early 19th century. He studied with Beethoven from his 10th year till about the 14th year. Very good friends with the Czerny family, who were a comfortable family, and Beethoven liked to come there because there was no strife, and most of the time he was around aristocrats, and he felt uncomfortable, although they were very helpful to him, as perhaps to no other composer, not even Haydn. Of course, Haydn lived in a generation earlier where there was more of an institutional patronage of the aristocracy. Esterhazy would give him an orchestra and so forth. But Haydn was a servant, and we must remember that until Beethoven's time, the musician was a social inferior, and not with Beethoven. He demanded equality with the wealthy.
Was it only equality, or did he demand a superior status, really?
Well, I think he took the position that he was a great man, but he went overboard with it to achieve a social equality, and Haydn could not have that. Haydn had to wear the specific garb, a certain outfit, the right buckles, everything on his shoes. So even there, the generation from Haydn's birth, 1732, to Beethoven's 1770, Mozart was already feeling restless with that form of patronage, and he was born in 1756. So think of from Beethoven's day, 1800, to 1830, till that year. Well, what a difference in the world. 90% of all the inventions that we know came from 1800 till now. So Beethoven we can't picture with his wig and buckled shoes and kowtowing to a prince or anyone, and he refused to.
How about
of course,
Schubert?
all the Congress of Vienna, where they were, after Napoleon's bit, they were dividing Europe up again. This all took place in Vienna, and the whole world is now politically changing as well.
How about Schubert? How did he adapt to this?
Schubert, a total dropout.
He
No
avoided the
official
question.
position, absolutely. No help from the aristocracy here. Again, this is one generation now after Beethoven, although he dies only 18 months after in 1828 and is a pallbearer of Beethoven's. But he's the first romantic, not in his symphonies and his sonatas, where he's still part of the great idea that stemmed from Viennese classicism, but in the songs and the small piano pieces. He's this transitional master who is a total dropout. No prince is helping him out. He's a bohemian. He lives off the bounty of his friends. He was a school teacher at his father's school. He gives that up. He can't stand teaching. He just has a very good time. Beer at night. His friend Huttenbrenner said Schubert was a fun-loving person. He lived really off the bounty of his friends, who understood him and loved to sing his songs. He had one friend that was a famous baritone who would sing, and he would accompany waltzes. And he had a whole little circle of friends, and he was one of the centers. And that was it with Schubert. Didn't know Beethoven. Beethoven was a little too hard to get to. Though Beethoven saw in his last year some of Schubert's compositions, and it's reported that Beethoven said, he has the divine spark. Well, let's get back to what Czerny said about Beethoven. I never started. Czerny writes, it was astonishing how Beethoven could take in compositions at a glance, even manuscripts and large scores, and how well he could play them instantly. In this respect he had no equal. His manner of interpreting them was always decisive, but sharp and hard. The same praise is due his presentation of the great master's compositions. He played Handel's oratorios and Gluck's works wonderfully, and thereby earning the greatest applause, and this also holds good for Sebastian Bach's fugues. He once told me that as a boy he had been negligent and not much taken to task, and that his musical training had been a poor one. And yet, Beethoven continued, I had a talent for music. It was touching to hear him utter these words with all seriousness, as though none otherwise would have suspected it. On another occasion, the conversation turned on the fame which his name had gained throughout the world. Nonsense, he roared. I never thought of writing for reputation and honors. What is in my heart must come out, and so I write it down. Aside from those times when he was in one of the melancholy moods which occasionally overtook him, and which resulted from his physical ailments, of which he had thousands upon thousands, he was always merry, mischievous, full of witticisms and jokes, and cared not a whit what people said of him, thought of him. His improvisation was brilliant beyond all thoughts, and astonishing in the extreme, and no matter in what company he might be, he knew how to make such an impression on every listener that frequently there was not a dry eye, while many broke out into loud sobs. For there was a certain magic in his expression, aside from the beauty and originality of his ideas and his genial way of presenting them. When he had concluded an improvisation of this kind, he was capable of breaking out into boisterous laughter and of mocking his listeners for yielding to the emotion he had called forth in them. He would even say to them, "You are fools." At times he felt himself insulted by such manifestations of sympathy, and would say, "Who can continue to live among such spoiled children?" he would cry. And for that reason alone, he told me, he declined to accept the invitation sent him by the King of Prussia after an improvisation of this kind. Well, Matt, when did we last cry after hearing a great man improvise for us? What a moment. Can we have another performance of the B-flat, or do you have to do something?
Well, I suppose we could do the commercial after. That would be
Okay,
no problem.
here is the great artist Arthur Schnabel in the first movement of the 11th of Beethoven's 32 piano sonatas. Arthur Schnabel in the first movement of Opus 22, the B-flat sonata, the 11th. This sonata probably was a favorite of Beethoven's because it still belongs to the 18th century. I think this four-movement sonata is a summing up process, for the rest of the sonatas would deviate from, quote, formality in many thousands of ways. And once the 18th century was over, Beethoven's heart was never in it again. We'll return with a rouse performance of the B-flat sonata right after these messages. Taking the cake, as Beethoven said of this sonata in a letter to his brother. He also said this sonata is in apple pie order. And I think this was the work that really ends his first period, in the piano sonatas at least. Claudio Arrau, always interesting, always original, is the next artist. A very fine reading of the B-flat Sonata's first movement, Allegro con brio, Claudio Arrau.